Okay, so good morning, everyone, and a very warm welcome to today's webinar. My name is Barry Crosby, and I'm one of the communication officers for the Green Area Hub project. I'm delighted to be hosting the session this morning as part of our career pathways for PhDs and early career researchers. Before we begin, I'd like to briefly introduce the Green Area Hub. The Green Area Hub officially began in September 2022 as a coordination and support action funded by the European Commission under the Horizon Europe programme. Today, the Green Air Hub represents a network of 15 EU ERANETs, co-funds and self-sustained initiatives active across the agri-food and biotechnology sectors. Together, we work to strengthen collaboration, share knowledge and support research and innovation across Europe. As many of you will be familiar with our Breakfast Club series, which we launched in October 2023, and we've hosted 6 very successful thematic series so far, ranging from circularity in agriculture and sustainable food systems to animal health and welfare. If you're interested in exploring any of these topics, all webinar recordings are now available on the Green Era Hub YouTube channel, so please do check that out. Now, the series which continues today shifts focus somewhat from our previous investigation of scientific themes to that of career development. The idea behind the current series is to explore what lies beyond the lab, to highlight the wide range of career pathways available to science PhDs and early career researchers, and to provide real grounded insights from professionals who have successfully navigated transitions across academia, industry, policy, and civil society. So today it's a real pleasure to welcome the fourth distinguished speaker to our series, Professor Deborah Roberts, Deputy Chief Executive Officer and Director of Science at the James Hutton Institute in Aberdeen in the United Kingdom. Professor Roberts leads the Institute's scientific strategy and impact, overseeing 5 science departments and shaping its approach to open science and public value. Trained as an agricultural economist, her career is a powerful example of how deep disciplinary expertise can grow into senior leadership at the intersection of research, policy, and public service. With more than 30 years of experience in rural economic analysis, Professor Roberts has led influential research on agricultural and environmental policy, regional development, and social well-being in rural communities. Over her time, her work has expanded beyond research itself into shaping how science is organized, supported, and translated into real-world impact. Alongside her role at the James Hutton Institute, she is an honorary chair at the University of Aberdeen Business School and currently serves as president of the Agricultural Economics Society. Today, Professor Roberts' talk is entitled Beyond the Lab, From Agricultural Economics to Strategic Leadership in Research Management and Scientific Policy, where she will share career insights and highlight some of the lessons that she's learned along the way. If you have a question for Professor Roberts at any time, please do feel free to submit your question through the Q&A and chat function, which I've enabled for everyone. So thank you all very much for joining us today. And without further ado, it's my pleasure to hand over to you, Deborah. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Barry. Excellent. So thank you very much for that introduction, Barry, which was very nice. I think I'm going to try and record it or take it down. It presented it's a true summary, but it's quite odd to hear it said, actually, if I'm honest. And I think this will come across when I'm explaining my career pathway to you this morning. Now, before I start, I just wanted to say I was really aware when I was pulling this together that the context in which I had my career path is very different to what you're going to be facing over the next few years. And I'm very conscious of that. I think academia has changed a lot in terms of its expectations from PhD and early career researchers from when I was going through the system. And I think personally, things have changed massively. When I did my degree, I didn't have to have a student debt. I faced entirely different cost of living at different stages of my life. So your decisions will be different. But I hope what I provide this morning is an example of a career path and some insights which might be useful for you. It's certainly not a template, but hopefully I'll come up with some ideas that will be valuable. And thank you very, very much for inviting me to share my pathway with you this morning. So I'll just try and move on. Why is this not moving? There we go. So my pathway has been quite a long road. I'm nearing the end of my career now. I think I can say that without giving anybody any surprises. It has been very non-linear, and I think most pathways, if I'm honest, are non-linear. It has had some points at which there were some important decisions I had to make, and I'm going to highlight this. And I think if I was better at graphics, I'd have a pathway in the road and I could have gone one way or the other. I'm not that good. So I'll just highlight those points at which I think there were some pretty critical decisions I had to make. Who would have known if I took another pathway? But I'll highlight when that occurs. There are also some things I'm going to highlight as well, which I think were really important in terms of determining my next steps. I didn't realize it when I did them, but they certainly helped me in terms of increasing my options in my career path. So I'm going to highlight 3 of those things, come back to them at the end. And I also just wanted to say, it's not just non-linear. When I was reflecting on this last night, different parts of my career pathway, some went very, very fast, some went incredibly slowly, and I thought I was going to be stuck forever. So that's, I think, fairly normal, and I'll point out why that happens at different points in your career. Just to say it's an interesting path, and yeah, everybody's got their own. It's nice to have this opportunity to look back, to be honest. Before I get into it, though, I just wanted to talk a little bit about my current role, because it's hard to explain your job to people. So I thought I'd try and explain where I am right now before I start talking how I got there. My current role is as Director of Science at a research institute called the James Hutton Institute, which is in Scotland. There's about, well, just over 500 employees, most of which are science and technical staff, and we also have a complement of professional services that provide the vital support to the research that we do. So it's quite a big research institute. It has 5 different science departments. It's very broad in terms of its science. And that's one thing which, when I reflect, I started in a very narrow PhD in one discipline. I now have to represent scientists from the natural sciences, a whole massive range, right the way through from cell and molecular sciences, right the way through to anthropologists. There's 2 main sites, and so I have to commute between two sites quite regularly. And we have 3 research farms, which are really vital platforms for the work that we do. And over time, I've come to understand much more about the importance of research infrastructure. That's part of my responsibility in ensuring that we've got the research infrastructure to let all of our brilliant scientists do their work. We are home to the University of Dundee Plant Sciences Division. So we have about 60 academics from a university co-located with us. And to be honest, we're co-located in a way that the offices are right next door to each other. I sometimes don't know who's a Hutton employee and who's a university employee. It's very, very integrated, which I think is very good for our science. And we have about 100 PhD students, of which we're super proud. And for me, they are a vital, vital part of the Institute in terms of its research environment and its vibrancy. We get funding from Scottish Government to preserve our national capabilities that underpin research, not just our own research, but others across Scotland and beyond. In particularly, we curate quite a lot of important scientific collections. We're the home of the Scottish National Soils Archive. We have eDNA archives. We have crop germplasms. We are home to the Commonwealth Potato Collection. And that creating and caring for that is another vital element of my role at the moment. And we link into lots of national and international observation networks, which is becoming increasingly important. So we see ourselves as part of the Scottish research ecosystem, but also the EU ecosystem and global ecosystem, really, in terms of the information we provide. Our research is focused on addressing really pressing global challenges, which all of you here will be very aware of in relation to climate change and the biodiversity crisis, and the need to increase food demand, increase energy, and increase fresh water as a result of the population increase that's expected. But at the same time, recognizing that the pressures on our land are incredibly intense, our soil is degrading, we've got biodiversity loss, and that all of these issues are fundamentally intertwined. So it's an incredibly complex situation in which researchers within the Institute are working, and it needs interdisciplinary, team-based, systems-type approaches. So my job, what do I have to do with all of this? Well, alongside another director of science, who I'm very, very glad that there's two of us, to be honest, we're responsible for setting the science strategy, and that includes horizon scanning. What big issues do we see coming along the horizon, and what science capability are we going to need in order to address that? I'm personally more responsible for the research governance within the Institute. And this is something, when I started my career, I never thought I would enjoy, but I do. I really enjoy looking out and understanding how to preserve research quality and research integrity. And more recently, I've been responsible for pushing the open science agenda across the Institute. So open science is all about making sure our funders get value for money, that our results are shared as quickly as possible with as many people in the right format. And that's a challenge for some of the scientists that I'm working with, because it's a very big change in their approaches. So it needs a lot of negotiation, but I think it's fundamentally important, and open science is good science. I'm responsible for co-designing with the Director of Finance our income generation strategy to make sure the Research Institute remains economically viable. And my economic training obviously comes in useful there. And it's a really key element of my job is ensuring that the research environment within the Institute is vibrant, it supports careers, and it makes sure that colleagues, in aligning with the Institute goals, are also satisfying their own personal goals. I have to represent the Institute externally, which is a part of the job I probably least like doing. This is a picture of me feeling very uncomfortable on a panel, but it's something that I do have to do. And with practice, I hope I'm getting a little bit better. And then the other thing that I'm responsible for, and this is in a slightly different colour font because personally I took this on because it's important to me. I lead the equality, diversity and inclusion work within the Institute. Partly because I think it's critical to how well we function, but partly because I think it's really important in terms of those issues about ensuring a vibrant and equitable research environment and doing the best for colleagues. So, the beginning, where did I start? My PhD. Why did I do a PhD? I did it because I did much better in my first degree than I thought I was going to do. It was a big surprise, and because I'd forgotten to apply in the milk rounds for jobs. So essentially, I got to the end of my degree and I didn't have a job to go to, but I'd got a very good degree and I got the offer of this scholarship. I don't come from an academic background. I knew nothing about academia, to be honest, apart from my experience as an undergraduate. But the opportunity was there. It was a good university. And it was fully funded. And so I thought, yes, let's go for this. The focus of the research was, that doesn't sound a very good reason for doing it, does it? I should also say, I absolutely loved doing my dissertation in the final year of my degree. I loved that idea of pulling all of my learnings together and problem solving. And that is something which is fundamental to all research and for everybody that works in a lab. And I liked it, I knew I could do it, and so that's why I did my PhD. It wasn't just because I didn't have any other choices. The subject area was given to me, and it was a really good one. It was about trying to understand the impact between the farm sector and the wider economy. So if there's a policy change in agriculture, how does that feed through to other sectors in the economy? And that taught me deep expert skills in terms of something called social accounting matrices, which linked to national accounting, so mainstream economics. I had to sort of get right into the figures there. And a method called general equilibrium analysis, which became, I was lucky, I was working in an area which was becoming more popular as I was doing my PhD in it. And it also meant my agricultural economics is a very applied subject. And it meant I had to do a lot of policy analysis in my as part of my PhD training, which was really, really useful. I had to learn about policy. The examples that were in my PhD were about at that stage, it was when milk quotas were first put in. That's such a long time ago. The impacts of foot and mouth disease I looked at, and later on, the impacts of BSE on the wider rural economy. So in terms of skills, there was some very specific economic training that I undertook, but I also had to sort of upskill in terms of understanding policy. The other really important things which the PhD gave me was experience in teaching, because I did tutoring, and that was very valuable. And I also I took the opportunity of doing small pieces of research support for academics in the department in interesting things like the economics of egg production, I remember I did, and the demand for fish, a huge different range of topics. But actually the skills I learned there about, usually I was just presenting diagrams for them, doing some data analysis. But that was a really important complement to what my formal training as part of my PhD. And at that point, I joined an academic society, the Agricultural Economics Society. That was my sort of home, if you like, in terms of my discipline base. And that has proved a very important step throughout my career. And I'll come back to that in a moment. What were the challenges? Well, when I was going through the system, which was in the 80s, economics was a very cutthroat discipline. When you gave a seminar, you were lucky if you got past the title before someone actually ripping you into pieces. It was very, very male dominated, to be honest, and it was very aggressive in terms of the way they went about things. I think it still is, but much less than it was at that point. And at that point, I lacked confidence. I can remember actually throwing up once or twice when I had to give presentations. It was that bad. I stuck on in there. What would I do differently? When I started, the social contract for researchers has really changed, I think, into something where these days it's really accepted that in return for the funding for our research, we have to show what impact we make. I didn't have that same understanding when I started out about the importance of showing the impact of my research. So now I would have done much more training or understanding about how to engage stakeholders in my research, understanding theories of change and how impact from research is generated. And I would have done media training, because I've never quite got over that dread if someone phones up and asks me to do a news item. So I wish I'd done that earlier on in my career. So next stage is just moving on. I was very lucky in getting a lectureship in the department where I did my PhD very quickly, actually before I even finished my PhD, which was a blessing, but also a bit of a curse, because it meant I threw myself into teaching, designing lecture programs, and actually the PhD went on a back burner. So it didn't actually get finished for 6 years. Fortunately, that's quite hidden in my CV. But it meant that at quite a young age, I was 24 when I got my lectureship, and I hadn't actually published. That would just not happened these days, I know, but it was a great opportunity. And I was thrown in the deep end, and I got huge skills teaching in a great economics department, great students, learned a lot in that period. But then I had a very important, this was my first sort of, I guess, key point where I could have gone in a different direction. For personal reasons, myself and my partner at that stage decided to move to Scotland, and I, at that point, had 2 children. And it's always difficult when you're in a partnership. And I resigned my post because one of us had to get a job. And we decided for personal reasons, we wanted to bring the children up in Scotland. He's Scottish. And so we moved to Scotland, and at that point, I didn't have a job. Now, that was a massive risk. I very fortunately did get a job very soon after we relocated in the University of Aberdeen. So I'll talk a little bit about this job. The job was as a research fellow in an interdisciplinary research centre, which focused on rural development. Now, for me, this was a big change because I moved from agricultural economics, which was in an economics department, to a new geography department, a completely different place within the university infrastructure. And I think it was only in my head, not in anybody else's, but it did feel as though I'd gone from a lectureship slightly back to a research fellowship. And I had to get over that. I had to get over the fact it wasn't me that was doing organising lecture programmes anymore. I was there, my role was completely different. It was probably the best thing that I'd ever done, actually, in terms of my future career path. It worked out incredibly well for me. It meant I was exposed to, because it was interdisciplinary, a whole new range of disciplines and research methods. I undertook training in research methods, and later on I taught research methods. So I'm a sort of positive economist, but I had to learn about qualitative methods. I had to learn about the difference between all of the different social sciences and how that related to epistemologies and the ways of thinking in different disciplines. It was really, really valuable. And it was a very practical job. I had to get experience in grant writing, not just for myself, but for other people. I had to pull together teams, and I had to understand what made a good interdisciplinary team. What were the dynamics that were important? Personally, I tried to keep going in my own research, but it allowed me to switch from a focus on agriculture more to rural economics. And I placed myself more towards regional economics than previously. So I had to reinvent myself a bit. It was hugely valuable, and I've moved to Scotland, as I said, and I've stayed in Scotland ever since, and it's a country I absolutely love. So definitely made the right decision there. Now, I'm going to talk now a little bit about something that I did around that time in my career, which I think was a real career booster. I don't find networking easy. I find it difficult approaching people in conferences. But what I did at that point in my career was volunteer to be the conference program organizer for my academic society. Now, this meant that I was responsible for collecting conference submissions, reviewing submissions with others, and pulling together the conference program. It meant that I was exposed to other people's topic areas and a wider range of research methods that were being used within the society. And it was really useful, actually, in terms of horizon scanning, seeing what topics were coming up on the agenda. And it provided me with a massive range of a new international perspective, but a massive range of people I suddenly got to know because they were sending me their abstracts. I was putting them in the program. I had to talk to them at the conference. It was the best way ever of my name getting known within the society. But relatively little work. It was an enjoyable job, actually. And so for me, this made networking from that point on so much easier because actually people knew me a little bit more. So it broke down that initial barrier. I still struggle a little bit with networking. But it always seems like I go to people rather than people come to me. But then I think everybody probably thinks that when they're networking. But I would think this is a top tip. Doing citizenship roles like this also looks great on your CV. And I made friends and part of that process that have stayed with me throughout. But looking back, that was a really, really useful thing to have done. Anyway, going back to my career, I moved from the research fellowship into an SL. And then this is what I call, I guess, my slow zone. I did gradually over time move up the career ladder within academia, but it wasn't fast. And the reason for that was because I had other things going on in my life. And I was very, very happy in the balance that I managed to achieve at that point between work and non-work issues. And then my 4 sons who now are a huge support to me in my work. Whenever I get stuck now, I phone them up. So it was definitely worth investing at that point in time. They all became economists, actually. The other thing that happened was, and this does happen, the place where you work might restructure. My university completely restructured. The department I was in got shut, so I had to move into another department. I applied for promotion from reader to chair. I didn't get it. And that's hard. It's hard when you apply for promotion, but you don't always get promotion. People don't talk about that, but very, very rarely do people get promoted in academia first time. I very much encourage people to share when things don't work as well as when things work. I kept going though. I took a responsibility which was at institute level, which was supporting the university's ref submission for the new department that I was in, and that helped increase my profile within the university a bit and gave me valuable training and skills. And the third time I applied, I was lucky enough to be promoted to chair. And I think that whole process was useful in that it gave me a bit of resilience. It really taught me that just because you don't get something first time round doesn't mean that you're not worth it. It just means it's not quite right time. And so you should just keep going. So I would just pass that advice on. Someone at that point, when the university was all being restructured and you had all these awful interviews with people about where you were going to go, what you should do, a senior member of staff at the university at that point said, yes, Deb, you're a survivor. And at that time, I thought, what on earth does that mean? I don't know what it means. But actually, funnily enough, I come back to that. Every time I'm challenged, I come back to that. Yeah, it's going to be okay. You're going to survive. Nothing is that bad. Just keep going. So, next big junction in the road, we're nearing the end now, you'll be pleased to know, was just after I got my chair. This isn't to scale, really. I had a decision or an option to leave academia and going to science leadership. I mean, it's staying in academia, but it's a very, very different role. And I didn't know if I could do it. I hadn't had to have that sort of strategic role previously. So it was a big decision. I could have stayed where I was. I just got my chair. I could have kept going with my own personal research. But I guess I was looking for new challenges at that point. It had been quite a bruising process to get promoted. And so I decided I would. And it was at this point that I joined the James Hutton Institute. But at that point, it was as head of a department. And it was quite a big department called the Social, Economic and Geographical Sciences Department. Now, this was very much a role where it was about leading that department. I think they allocated nominally 10% of my time for my own research. The rest of it was about leading others. I guess why I was keen to make that decision was because I mentioned the university had restructured. So I actually ended up teaching things in the university which were nowhere near my interests. I remember doing a field trip to the London office market and taking students around the commercial property market and thinking, why am I doing this? You know, I'm a farmer's daughter. I'm more interested in agricultural economics than what I'm doing. This allowed me to go back into the topics that the James Hutton Institute looks at, which I think are fundamentally important and where I grew up, where my roots are. But it allowed me to move back at a stage where I'd picked up skills along the way and with much more confidence than I had previously. And now the Institute's strength is in interdisciplinary research. And I'd again picked up that skills when I'd taken that career path, when I'd gone back to that research fellowship role, that built up those the skills in interdisciplinarity, which are pretty unique. So I felt I could really make a difference. And the good news is the department I joined was absolutely amazing. It still is. The only thing I could do was mess it up, frankly. It was a brilliant department. It had a fantastic research environment, very strong researchers, and the department taught me so much about what a good unit looks like and how to support researchers. So this mug reminds me because I did a quiz once. It shows I spent far too long doing a little quiz and trying to find questions about everyone in the department. And then we did a sort of person that won the quiz won one of these mugs. I know a lot about SEGs. There was lots of jokes because when you say SEGs, it sounds like another word, and it all sounds like you're leading something which you shouldn't be leading in a research institute. So yeah, it was just fun. It was so much fun, and I absolutely loved it. And it was because of that. Oh no, sorry, another career booster. It was such a good department. I didn't have to spend much time leading them. They were leading themselves brilliantly. So I took the opportunity of doing a short secondment in Scottish Government. This was also incredibly valuable. A lot of the work we do in the Institute is for Scottish Government, and especially the department I was leading was working quite close with policy. Yet I felt I'd never been directly within a policy making environment when I'd worked. So I asked if I could do a secondment. They accepted because it allowed me to help them with one of their consultations. I also helped with bits of research that were coming through to Scottish Government from other academics, where I had to review them for their policy implications. And they allowed me to sit in on lots of Scottish Government operational meetings, like their comms meetings. It gave me such an important understanding about what policy needs from science, and also the speed at which it's completely different from academia. The speed at which policy works. I now know when one of my colleagues is writing a policy brief or something, I can see what on the other side of the table it's going to look like, and how important it is that you get your messages right and that you're tight and you think about current policy when you're suggesting any policy changes. So lots of insights there with a really, really short secondment, super useful, made new contacts, and taught me a massive amount. So this is the last stage, progression to Director of Science. This was about 8 years ago. Why did I do that? It was a move up within the Institute. It was because, again, I felt like I could make a difference. I'd picked up new skills and I wanted to affect change across the whole Institute, not just in my department anymore. I wanted to drive strategy in the whole Institute, and I wanted to make a difference. And these pictures just pick up on some of those elements of my job, which I was talking about. So this one in the bottom left-hand corner is where we got a workshop together with colleagues. These are my open science champions in each department across the whole Institute, who are trying to explain to colleagues why open science is good and the issues that need to be overcome. The next one is when we were doing a workshop. This is Settlers of Catan. I love Settlers of Catan as a game. And I managed to think of a way of using it with a colleague to think about how to develop a new flagship initiative on land use and what would be the key elements we should be looking at. So using games as a means of drawing out ideas from stakeholders. The one on the top, the picture on the top right-hand corner is when we were trying to pull together our corporate plan. When you do corporate planning, there's no point the directors coming up with a corporate plan if you're not involving people in the design of that plan. So this was a workshop to try and bring people along to see what they thought were the priorities for the Institute for the next 5 years. And then finally, the march, this was a Pride March. I think this one was in Aberdeen. And this just reflects how proud I am that Hutton was represented in that march. Had the best flag by far, I thought. So, career booster, last career booster, just after I became director, I undertook, and again, I was very fortunate to be supported by the Institute in doing this, some formal training. I got a certificate in company direction, and that involved skills, some of which would just remind me. So finance for non-finance directors, I was lucky, I was an economist by training. So really that was just bringing back or looking at the skills that I'd learned in a different lens. Formal leadership for directors, formal strategy training, both of which were really useful. The most useful bit though was this, which sounds very boring. It was about governance. It was about understanding the role of the director and the role of the board and the difference between the executive and the board of directors, which was incredibly important. So governance was the one area I guess I'm still learning, if I'm honest. But what I hadn't picked up at that point in time. It did take time. I did have to do exams, which was really horrible. But it did sort of signal, I think, to others my commitment to where I was in my career. And actually, I've been lucky enough to get appointed to a board, in effect. I was appointed as a Scottish Land Commissioner in 2024. And so I'm able to sit the other side of my executive role at the moment on a board on another organisation, and an organisation which I think aligns very strongly with my values about land reform. So, finishing off, what were the lessons I learned? Well, a PhD, amazing skills, opens up many, many career opportunities. This is just my route. It could have gone other ways. My route could have gone in other ways, but just it's just so many routes are opened. It's a fantastic training in so many things. I think I wish I took time to reflect a bit more as I was going on the skills that I was picking up. Uh, it's hard to take time to look back. You just kind of just go from one thing to the next. But with hindsight, that might have made me make slightly different decisions or do things at slightly different speeds along the career. So reflecting a little bit on where you are, taking time to do that on a regular basis, maybe every year, would be useful. I hope I've highlighted that you can do some extra things which are real boosters to your career path. For me, it was that doing that role within the Agricultural Economics Society, it was the secondment, and it was that formal training in company direction. These are really important in giving you new perspectives. And they also actually do send a signal. If you put them on your CV, they sort of send a signal about where you're wanting to go and that you're still learning and you know that you're committed to developing your career further. One thing I just never did was keep my CV up to date. So whenever I did change job, it was absolutely horrific because it just meant going back to this very out of date CV where I hadn't kept anything, put anything in. I often missed things out altogether. It looked a mess, and I never had enough time to prepare for the interview because I was just getting the CV ready. So don't do what I did there. Keep your CV up to date. And then finally, I just be brave, take risks. The things, I mean, there's things I suffer from imposter syndrome. I find some things very, very difficult. If you practice, they do get easier. But make sure you're enjoying your job, and make sure your job allows you to fulfill what you wanted to fulfill and aligns with your values. And I've been really, really lucky in that sense. So anyway, that's it. Thank you for your time.
Great, Deborah. Thanks so much. Really engaging and thought-provoking talk. I think you've given us a lot to reflect on, especially around, the importance of perseverance and that idea of keep going,
Yeah.
and especially ideas about how researchers can recognize the different strengths that a PhD can give them and how they can use those strengths to navigate the many and varied opportunities that lie there beyond the lab. We have some time for questions, so I'd love to open the floor to everybody joining us today. Please do feel free to pop your question into the Q&A or the chat box, and we'll get through as many of those questions as we can. Just to get us started, Deborah, if I may, I'll kick things off with a question of my own. I was just, it was really interesting just listening to you talk about the kind of unplanned nature of your career in many respects and how it followed a kind of a non-linear path. And I was just kind of wondering, looking back, was there any particular moment where you kind of realized your career might extend beyond a kind of traditional academic research path?
It's a really good question. Yes, I think it did. I think because I'd had to reinvent myself, actually. I guess that point where we moved to Scotland and I had to move into a different disciplinary area. Um, I think at that point I realized that actually changes like that open up opportunities, they don't shut them down. And that I could see myself going beyond the normal pathway. I guess I also, this is going to sound really awful, but because I'd changed my position within an academic institution, I could look at others and think, well, yeah, I know what you do, and I'm as good as you. and I can probably do that too. So I think that gave me a huge amount of confidence, but it extends out with that traditional academic pathway. I think it let me see I could do other things as well. Um, and I think also that job was interesting because it was when I started working with stakeholders a little bit more, and with other sectors and with people in policy agencies and with people in food, in the food sector, in the food and drink sector. And again, that's where you start seeing jobs that exist, which actually you don't even know about until you start getting to know people. It's very hard to understand what other people do for their living, isn't it? We all go along in our little sort of bubbles and we don't really understand the other jobs that exist. But actually, that working on more applied research in teams with stakeholders allowed me to open up opportunities as well. And I think it was at that point I probably thought, yeah, I can do. There's lots more things I can do than I thought.
Mm.
Yeah. It was
Yeah, thanks.
interesting as well because I mean, the friends that you make when you're doing a PhD, you keep in touch with usually. Um, and you do follow their career paths as well. And I look back now, and mine is much, much more non-linear than others. But I think mine's been more interesting, actually. And yeah, I've ended up a long way from where I started. And so those kinks in the road are good; they're not bad. Um,
Absolutely. And Deborah, just in relation to your experience in senior leadership roles, what skills do you think from your own PhD studies or indeed your early kind of research career do you think have been most valuable in terms of supporting your various different kind of the various different senior leadership roles that you've occupied throughout your career?
so I guess my disciplinary training has been useful. Being an economist is really super useful, because it provides a perspective that is valuable in lots of scenarios. So when we're thinking about our business model for the James Hutton Institute, I find it easy to engage with that. I find it very easy to follow sort of financial accounts, understanding financial positions. But also strategically, I understand about markets. I understand about how economies work and how the macroeconomy affects decisions. So I think that's all been very useful. I mentioned that my economics is very applied. Often, people working in agricultural economics are more focused on farm level issues, actually, more microeconomic issues. My PhD happened to be on more macro level issues, which meant I really had to understand about agricultural policy. At that point, it was the Common Agricultural Policy, having to keep up to date with those sort of things, meant that I got very used to having to follow changes in policy environments and the macroeconomy. And that's what you need in a senior leadership role. You need to have that wider perspective about what's happening in the macroeconomy. So I think my specific training was really useful there. But to be honest, Barry, I think it's actually soft skills that are more important in senior leadership. And I think so. It doesn't matter what discipline I was in. It was the PhD provides you with those soft skills. That tutoring that you do, or I was lucky enough to do as a PhD student, when you have to relate to others, when you have to put yourselves in their feet, that is really important. So it's those soft skills as well as that sort of formal training that you receive.
Mm, absolutely. And for PhDs and postdocs who enjoy research but are curious about broader roles, what early signals might suggest like research management or policy could be a good fit for them, do you think?
Um, uh, what would be good? I suppose it's the extent. So, thinking about research management, I mean, I mentioned one of my jobs is about looking after research integrity. Now, when I kind of missed the stage um, where research ethics came into social science, where everybody had to fill in a research ethics form in order to do a project. I came in as someone that had to impose that on researchers. And I was not the most popular person because that's another additional role that has to be done. I guess if I was someone that had to fill in a research ethics form and I thought, why am I having to do this? Why is this important? And you think beyond just I've got to do this because I want my research project to start. I need to get from A to B. But instead, you start thinking about actually, why is this process in place? Why is this research integrity important for the bigger, for what I do more generally, for the research environment generally? Then that's a signal that actually you might be interested in research management and research governance. So there might be issues like that which come in. I would say also, if you are one of those people are that enjoy the thinking through the real life impact of your research as opposed to the academic impact of research, and both are really, really important. But if you value the real life impact, that again gives a signal that actually you're thinking beyond the very short term, what you've got to do, and that maybe a job in research management would be of interest.
And Deborah, if a PhD student or a postdoc wanted to prepare now for future leadership roles, what experiences do you think they should actively begin seeking out at this stage?
Um, yeah, well, I think my examples would be good to go back to there. If there is a possibility of doing short secondments in different roles, I definitely go for that. And even if there's not the opportunity, try and create it. I asked, there wasn't a secondment going. I said, would it be possible to do this? And it's of benefit to the people that you're going towards. Often people would like doing exchange secondments as well. So suggest that to a partner. But I think placing yourself in a different environment is super useful training in terms of leadership. It just makes you see things from these different perspectives. The Yeah, it makes you see, and you might like working in that environment more than you like working in academia. Academia isn't for everybody at all. It is very slow. It is pretty competitive still. It's yeah, it's perfect. It's lovely. It's fantastic. You're problem solving. But there's other places that you can do those things as well. So yeah, I would definitely suggest taking opportunities for secondments, taking all the training you can get. Uh, well, not all the training. I'll be a little bit, uh, yeah, choose what interests you. But do think about the next stage as opposed to just where you are now. I think that would be my top tip.
That's great, Deborah. Thank you so much. Just some really nice comments coming in from our audience. Thanks very much for the amazing talk. Thank you so much for sharing your experience and journey. A few questions as well just coming in. One question from Carlos. What a beautiful self-reflection. Can you say something about how the world has changed when it comes to your personal quest for EDI and what things you think we are still to solve?
Oh, thanks, Carlos. Great question. Yeah, ED and I think there's lots and lots still to solve. So the issues that we're working on at the moment within the Institute, neurodiversity. We've got a group that have self-formed, which are being really, really active within the Institute about sharing their experiences and helping us understand how we can support colleagues better in that respect. So I think we're beginning to understand things which we didn't previously understand. And that, in terms of my role as science director, that includes me having to think about the infrastructure, the facilities that we provide to colleagues so that they best support them, and recognizing that we have a range of different needs and supporting those individuals. The obviously very divisive issue at the moment is in relation to trans people, which is very problematic. And people have very different views on that. And again, as a leader within the Institute, I have to be very conscious of everyone's views in that respect, but be very true to the commitment that we have in the Institute that we're trying to be fair and equitable and inclusive to everyone within the Institute. And it's really hard. I have to say the ED&I stuff I do is about the hardest. and it's not getting easier. It's getting more difficult and more complex. I'm so proud that within the Institute, when I took over, we had Bronze Award Athena Swan. We were recently awarded Silver Athena Swan. We have made progress. We have really changed things for women within the Institute. And in doing that, we've changed things for everyone within the Institute. And my ambition is that we go for gold, and I think we can do it. So I'm very aspirational there. The other area, which it's not really ED&I, but it links very closely, and it's something I'm very committed to, is the technicians' commitment. We have a group of amazing technicians that support our scientists. They're scientists in their own right, but their career paths are slightly different. They're not so visible in terms of the science that we do. We need to support them differently in terms of career development. And so I think we're working hard at the moment within the Institute. We're getting hard to get recognition of the role that everybody plays within that process of generating research impact. So yeah, I think that's been a really super positive change within my career span, that the focus, the recognition now is that it is teamwork. Research is teamwork. It's not just about one PI that goes out there, takes all the credit. That work couldn't be done if it wasn't for the team approach. And that includes professional services. It's not just even the researchers, it's the finance people, it's the HR people, it's the comms people. Everyone is really critically important. So that's, I think that is all part of ED&I actually, but perhaps not what you're expecting, Carlos, me to say.
Thanks so much, Deborah. Just a question about secondment. A two-part question just from a member of the audience. What was the most challenging part when you started your secondment in policy? And do you think there were any skills that could have been useful to have taken before your secondment?
Um, yeah, there would have been skills. Good question. There would have been skills that would have been useful. It would have meant that I was more useful to the Scottish government for sure. The most challenging thing was the speed. Honestly, academia, we, I know this, I work more with commercial companies now, and aligning our research with commercial companies, and everybody works at different speed. Um, with policy, it's breakneck speed. So they have to make decisions, they have to review research evidence within an afternoon. Whereas I was used to having, if I needed to do a literature review, I didn't want to say anything until I'd read everything thoroughly and really sort of made sure that I was representing everyone's view and sort of sitting on the fence. These people say this, these people say this. Within that secondment period, I had to give advice within an afternoon and make decisions and actually not sit on the fence as much as you tend to do in academia. So it taught you there's no choice. You have to. If the minister needs some advice in an hour's time, you have to provide that advice. So I guess that I wasn't very good at that. I found it really difficult, but I got better. And I think likewise, the Institute now, we work closely. We have quite a lot of spin-in companies, and they're teaching us about speed as well. We have this is a story about a vertical farming company that has a very, very prestigious company that we're lucky enough to have co-located on one of our Research Institute sites. And they started thinking about what they could do in terms of forestry and growing trees, because we don't have enough tree saplings to sort of satisfy our demands at the moment. And this seemed like a really good research question. In the Institute, we've got lots of skills about forestry and breeding and lots of stuff. So we got together, we said, yeah, let's look into this. And so we, as a research institute, decided we'd pull together all the people that knew that. And I think we took about 2 weeks to get a meeting in the diary, and we all came around the table. That same weekend, we started talking about it. That company had just gone out and started growing seeds. They'd just got on with it. And it really was a lesson to me that we need to align the speeds of working with who we're trying to work with sometimes. And yeah, we don't always have to do things quite perfectly at first. Yeah, what's that saying? Perfection is the enemy of the good, isn't it? Or something. I probably got that wrong. What is that saying? Perfection is the enemy of the something. I don't know what it is, but I'll look it up afterwards.
And Deborah, thanks so much. Just time for one or two more questions just before the end of the webinar. Somebody is just asking your advice with regards to PhD students who want to go abroad on a scholarship and who maybe have no experience in the new environment, including kind of maybe communication skills. The social environment is different, and this could really kind of impact upon their career and
Mm.
academic development. Do you have any kind of particular specific advice for such PhD students?
Yeah, it's a massive challenge. I think what I would do is find out how much support the institute you're going to will give you before you go. And find out about that. Often you can get, I mean, what we try to do in the institute, if we're hosting people, is give them a buddy to help them with that initial stage. So I would do a little bit of just checking what the institute you're joining can do to help you so that you don't miss that help. It really is amazingly useful to have one person there that's been through it already, that knows the sort of challenges that you're facing moving to that environment. The experience you get will be brilliant, I'm sure, or useful. I'm sure it might be difficult at first. So I think it goes back to that. Sometimes you just have to take risks a little bit, and know it's going to be hard, but there are things you can do to help. If they don't offer it, ask for a buddy, I would suggest. Ask if there's someone, another PhD student that perhaps has been there a year, or ECR that's from the same background as yourself that can help you integrate. I think that would be a good thing to do.
Deborah, thank you so much. I think we're just coming up to 10 o'clock, so I think we're just going to have to wrap things up. I'd just like to say thank you once again to Professor Roberts for joining us and giving us such an insightful and generous presentation this morning. Deborah, I think you've shared not only your own career journey with us, but also offered some very practical and honest advice, which I'm sure will stay with many of us long after this morning's session. It's been a real pleasure to have you with us. And to everyone who joined us, thank you for your time, your questions, and your continued interest in the Green Air Hub Breakfast Club series. A quick reminder that recordings from all our previous thematic series are available on the Green Era Hub YouTube channel. So if you've missed any of those and would like to look at them, please do visit our Green Era Hub YouTube channel. And we'll hope you all join us again for the next webinar in 2 weeks' time, which will be on Thursday, the 12th of February, which will feature Professor Claire Chenu, Director of Research at INRAE and Professor of Agro-Paris Tech in France, where she'll be joining us to discuss what lies beyond the lab, from soil research to shaping global action for climate and sustainability. Until then, thanks once again to Professor Roberts and to everyone for joining us today. And we hope to see you again in 2 weeks' time. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.